Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Medicare Cafe pre-chat, where myself and Carrie get on a few minutes early and just kind of talk about life updates, kind of talk about, or like answer questions that you may have. So, Carrie, how are you? How's your day going?
Not feeling very Carrie-like. Not feeling very Carrie-like.
Here's the thing. People who, like, this is their first time on the Medicare Cafe, or probably think, like, Sex and the City reference. Like my Carrie.
You lost me.
I'm a Samantha.
I don't watch that.
You're a Carrie.
Yeah, you totally lost me there.
Anybody else?
Reference.
No? Okay.
I was just going to say you have the JV team today.
The JV. Well, no, that goes without saying. People, yeah.
I get that.
So welcome. If you're like, here, I came here for hard-hitting facts on Medicare, and I came here promised how to learn about managing my staff, then like if you're watching the recorded version of this, fast forward like 2 minutes, okay? This is the nonsense. What I say is if you're logging on early to the cafe, you get the chaos and you don't throw a fit. If you would like to participate in the chaos, then this is my phone number. This is my number. You can text me at any time, and you will get me. It's not fake. If you like I had people be like, haha, this is fake. Like, it's not. I'm sorry. It's not like a cool number, but it is me.
It's just your burner that also goes to your cell. I get it.
It's my burner that goes to my cell. So if you do want to text me, feel free to do so. But today I am joined with Matt Carson. I about said vice principal.
Vice principal.
Kind of.
Like on today's topic, that's actually not too far off.
Honestly, vice president of sales with senior marketing specialist. And you're kind of the guy that we credit for like hiring the most people, I think, of our company, and also firing the most people at our company. So like, welcome.
Not for a little while, but yeah.
Not for a minute.
Yes.
So welcome. But again, this is just the part where we kind of talk about chaos. And let me tell you some chaos that just makes me so excited that I get to work with this kid. Starts by saying, I told you, like, the world needs to know that you're a jerk. So we started this off by me kind of explaining, okay, we're going to do a pre-chat. It's going to seem chaotic. It's just going to be okay. And his exact words were just so enthused. I watched a Medicare Cafe last week to prepare for this. I've been doing Medicare Cafe.
I've watched them before, but I don't watch every week.
2016.
We've also talked before about how with the amount of things our company produces these days, it would be a full-time job.
Here's the political answer. Okay.
It would be a full-time job to consume all of the content that our company puts out.
I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, as your friend and as your colleague, you would think that you would support me in what I do and have been doing since 2016.
Some people would think that.
Some people would think that. Not here today. So welcome, everybody, to the Medicare Cafe. It is at the top of the hour. It's 10 o'clock. Just because Matt Carson doesn't watch the cafe, I appreciate you all tuning in and watching week after week. If you're watching the recorded version, you can press play at this point because we are here today to talk about managing your staff. Sadie says, who invited that guy? I agree, Sadie. I agree. So welcome, guys. So we've talked the last few weeks about this coming up AEP due to the IRA, due to changes, due to what's going on. And so the reason why we wanted to talk specifically today, we said we're going to focus on this from here to the end of the year. Well, this is still, you might say, this is a hard left turn. We're talking about people today. The reason for that, guys, is because with the crazy AEP, you might be finding yourself wanting to invest in staff, wanting to hire. And doing so can be is a huge investment of time and money.
Yeah, and I would say even not just hiring staff, but like investing in your current staff, like with all the things we were talking about and are going to talk about more in the coming weeks that we're expecting this AEP existing staff. I think there'll be a lot of need to invest in your existing staff because they will probably be having to work harder and take on more tasks than they have in past AEPs as well. So we'll kind of cover a little of both today. Yep.
And again, in case you did miss the beginning of the pre-chat, here with me, I have Matt Carson, again, our Vice President of Sales at Senior Marketing Specialist. Just a quick background on Matt, and I don't like talking nice about you. But
this is going to be the you started 3 months before me and you taught me everything I know conversation.
That is true.
That's usually what happens.
Matt and I both started in the company in 2013. We were both college students at that time, did our internships together. And I did start 3 months before him and taught him everything I knew about cold calling.
Yes.
So honestly,
those 3 months are still all the difference in seniority 11 years later.
Tell me why I'm wrong. Yep. You can't. So the reason why Matt is actually one of the more sought out people around this conversation around motivation, staff motivation, hiring, and sometimes corrective actions is, like I said, Matt is kind of the person in our company who has hired the most. Your start in management was actually our recruiters.
Yep.
So the people who call you from senior marketing specialists wanting you to take new contracts with us or wanting you to partner with us in some capacity or the other, that's the team that Matt led for the better part of his career. Now you've kind of taken a step out of that, looking over the overall sales team. But with that job comes a lot of hiring.
Yeah.
Comes a lot of firing.
Because it's me. I'm a nerd.
It's you.
I, in preparation, tried to the best of my knowledge, make a list of the people to figure out how many people.
I'm sure you're on some lists,
and I got to
from those same people.
48 people that I've hired in the last 8 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you know a thing
or
two.
About 30 full-time, 20 part-time, roughly.
Okay. So, needless to say, if I'm not going to toot your horn, you can do it because you are the stats guy.
I did prep for this, including watching Medicare Cafe.
An episode of the cafe.
It wasn't one episode. It was a few episodes. I wanted to get a general vibe lately of, what it looks like.
That's inaccurate. So, let's start talking first about hiring. Again, if you're going into this AEP, you're looking to add people to or maybe you're again, growth can look differently. You always say when you hire those 48 people that you've hired.
Those are the ones I could remember.
3 things that you look at. Let's start with work ethic.
Yeah,
so how do you gauge that?
Yeah, so honestly, I have redone interview questions so many times. I genuinely have probably gone through well over 100 interview questions over the last several years doing this. Have tried meeting on-site, off-site, how many people are in the room, is it just us? We've had them fill out little weird questions ahead of time where we left them in the room.
What was
and had
one that was if you were in
a
blender? What was that? You guys had a weird question?
That was not ours, no. No. You dreamt that, I guess.
Okay.
No, ours was they had to type out their favorite sandwich. We left them in the room when they got here and they had to type out how to make their favorite sandwich. Because the idea was that they could explain their, we could see their written communication skills because they have to explain complicated things. Anyway, we've ditched that. All of this to say, we have tried a ton of different things to try to best gauge how to hire someone right. Mostly learned through failing and hiring people who were not the right fit. And really, it kind of, at the end of the day, those 3 things are what we always try to distill it down to now. Their work ethic is the first one there. So, that's sometimes tough to gauge because you also got to remember in an interview, it's kind of like the social media highlight reel. You are going to see someone's absolute best self and they are going to tell you all of the right things in an interview typically. So you can't always take everything at surface value is what I would say there. Asking someone, Olivia, do you have a great work ethic? You're going to tell me you've got the best work ethic in the world, right? So that's not really what I look at there. I look at things like history in their job. So if they're job hopping, we had one in the last week or two that had 8 jobs in the last 10 years. And I will go line item through every single one of those and ask okay, talk to me about this job. What was that like? Why did you leave there? I will go through every single one of those and just hear trends.
How long is your interview? When you were doing your interview, let's say one that you're this is not going well. And one that's
I'll cut them at 10 minutes if it's bad. I used to be very polite of I'll ask a few more questions to draw this out. I feel like they're just wasting everybody's time there.
Sure.
But I'd say on average 30 minutes to an hour is pretty normal. Okay. Anyway, I will ask all the way through those questions of every single job. I will go line item, ask what made you start there? How'd you leave? Why'd you leave? Was it on your terms or their terms? What made you start the next job? What drew you to that job? So to kind of just get an idea of their motivation for that there. Also look for if they had any advancement in their jobs or if every one of them they worked and left in the same position. So look for things like that. Ask for examples of how they have shown their willingness to work hard. That's a question we have now of hey, give us a couple examples from past jobs of demonstrating your ability or your desire to work hard. So that's the first one is work ethic there. I'll add one other piece on work ethic that I really feel strongly about. If I'm hiring someone that's their first job out of school, I feel very strongly that they need to have either worked a job or somehow financially contributed to their own college schooling. I have had very bad experience with people who went to college and did not have any skin in the game, and then being their first job when we hire them there. I've had very good experience with a ton of first job hires, to be clear. But the common thread I have seen in first job hires that have gone well are ones that had some amount of skin in the game in their education. And honestly, we don't really care too much whether they went to college or not. But if they did, that's something that we look pretty strongly for. Were they working part-time jobs? Were they busting it for scholarships? Potentially like athletic scholarships as well, but like some form of they were working and doing something to help.
I feel like that's a hot take, but like I want to argue it, but I don't think I can based on our experiences. I want to argue it.
Yeah, again, in my experience, that's something where it's almost a like 100% red flag. If you went to college and didn't contribute anything for it and have not had a job since then, we're usually not the place to be your first test there.
So talk a little bit about the self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're like, how do you gauge that? How do you measure that? What does that look like?
So some of the questions we use on the self-awareness side are questions like, give me some examples of times that you have gotten some constructive criticism on the job or gotten some negative feedback on the job. Mostly just looking for someone who's willing to open up and be authentic. If someone has had, over a year of job experience, you've gotten some sort of constructive feedback, right? Like I don't think anyone has worked a job, I would argue probably for 90 days and not gotten some amount of constructive feedback on things. If you cannot think of an example of that in an interview, that one is a 99% hard no. Like if we ask someone that question and they're like, yeah, I really can't think of a time, like, okay, you're probably not very self-aware and not very receptive to feedback. If you feel
you're already lying to me.
One or the other. Like it's a bad start there. So that's a question we use for that. I also just look for, just the way they kind of talk about themselves. I mean, particularly when we're hiring someone into sales, like obviously you want some confidence, but you can kind of just gauge confidence versus arrogance a little bit in there as well. So self-awareness is big. I would say that's another, all three of these things. If I go through our sales team and everyone we've ever had here, I can't think of a single successful employee that did not have all three of these ingredients. So that's where I kind of started at. We've gone in circles a million different ways to do it, but it's all kind of boiled down to these three things. If I can feel confident that someone has these three things coming out of an interview, they're usually going to work out.
So how do you gauge if somebody is, the term that I use is, are you a full cup?
Yeah. The willingness to learn and be coachable and grow.
So how do you gauge that in an interview?
So honestly, like some of that kind of goes hand in hand with self-awareness of like, you've got to be willing to take feedback and willing to grow and feel, to your point, that you're not a full cup, meaning, there's nothing that can be added. You've got to feel like you've got more to learn and more to gain. But also like the willingness for that. So, I'm trying to think a few of the questions we use. One is like, how do you define, or what is your definition of success? So asking them to kind of paint that picture of what success looks like for them. Are they someone who, is defining their success as, I show up and I work 8 hours and I go home? Are they someone who is defining that as like, oh, I want to learn as much as possible. I want to advance in my career. I want to, make more money for my family, whatever the things are. Like those are more the traits we look for, is someone who you can tell is, trying to reach above and beyond and, not just status quo sitting there.
Yeah.
We find that question works pretty well for that because we're not asking them, are you willing to just work 8 hours, or do you want to, go above and beyond? Like, again, I guess it's trying to find the right questions that don't steer the answer. Yeah, exactly. So that one's define success.
So I think the best quote, I have two of them that I've ever heard when it comes to hiring people. Number one, you don't have to be good at hiring. This was actually my father-in-law told me. You do not have to be good at hiring because everybody's you don't have a crystal ball. You have no idea how that's going to work out. You do have to be good at firing. Yeah. You can't do both, right? And then the other one I heard was actually, I think it was Simon Sinek was on a podcast or something, and he said that, like, keep your ego out of it. Don't be afraid. When you hire somebody, it's not like you can't make mistakes. You're going to hire the wrong people.
Sure.
So don't have an ego to say, like, I can't fire them because that has to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah, I would agree. Right out the gate, I will say something we do to set the stage for feedback. I think this probably kind of segues us between our slides here, is we do 30, 60, 90-day reviews right away with all of our employees. We've got a template that we've played with a few different ones throughout the years. Right now we get the one through Workday that we have with Integrity. But we've used several different formats. I think the big thing is just having some form of a written review with some form of actual like grading. Ours right now is just like it's unsatisfactory, below expectations, meets expectations, above expectations, outstanding. So just like a 1 through 5 scale in several different areas. But setting that stage for feedback early on, I think, is really crucial. And like we give a lot of below expectations early on. I shouldn't say a lot, but like a large number of employees will have at least one category on one of their first 3 reviews that hits below expectations, because I think that just sets that stage of like, again, you want to find someone who is coachable. I shouldn't say set that stage. Sounds bad, like I'm intentionally giving someone bad feedback. I don't mean that. But I think, again, the type of employees we want are ones who are very coachable, very open to that, wanting to grow, very self-aware. So having those reviews early on, I think, will also tell you a lot, because to your point, like, you get to learn only so much in an interview. Yeah. You learn way more in the first 90 days. Yeah. I take pride in the fact that now, I would say within those first 90 days, we're probably 90+% sure if someone is going to succeed long-term or not. Where, if I go back to like some of the earlier hires, it was like a lot of people that lasted a year, sometimes even 2 years, when like we were pretty confident. Oh yeah, we were definitely like, I don't know if this is working, but like it took us forever to get to a point where we were sure we had done everything for them and for them to feel like it wasn't the right fit. So like, another term that sounds harsh, but I think is good, is failures fast. Failures fast. Yeah, if someone's not going to be the right fit, it does nobody any good. For like, they need that feedback. They can't improve if they don't know that it's a problem. Doesn't do them any good to have things sugar coated and strung along if you're already feeling like they're not going to be here long term. Keeping them around longer is not doing either of you favors, so long as you're giving them that feedback early and often and giving them the right support structure.
My mom always said there's kindness in honesty. Like, it might be hard. It might be hard to like give that feedback, but there is kindness and honesty.
Totally agree.
You're on the same page.
I steal that from you all the time.
So moving on. So we got the hire. You guys are experts on hiring. Congratulations. You just graduated from hiring school. Let's move on to like what happens in the in-between periods, right? Yep. So what is it like your job as a manager when you have to take off the agent hat and put on the boss hat, because they are very different skills, very different mindsets, from selling policies to helping, like, managing a human being. So let's talk a little bit about that phase of the motivating. And so you kind of have some 3 points here that helps you kind of make sure that you're getting the absolute most out of your people. And I think more importantly, like, keeping them happy. It's a two-way street.
Definitely.
You got to be happy with them, but they got to enjoy working with you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is where some things we talked about at the very beginning of investing is a word that we use a lot with employees. Like, you need to be of the mindset, if you're hiring someone, that you are willing to invest in them just as much as they are investing in, their time and effort to be a part of that job. Sure. Obviously, financial is part of that, but like your time, like, you really have to, view hiring an employee as a major time investment, at least during their kind of training period, which I would say is, I mean, it depends on their job. For us, I would say 90 days of pretty heavy training, and then probably close to a year of, less over the shoulder, but like still lots of constant, like probably weekly feedback for the first year there. So
that makes sense.
Setting the stage for that, weekly meetings we're really big on, weekly one-on-ones with the manager, whoever their direct supervisor is. We typically keep those, again, minimum the first 90 days, and then sometimes we'll drop those down to like every other week after that point, but usually for the first 90 days, if not the first year, they're having a weekly one-on-one with their manager. I would highly suggest that. Again, that's another piece that kind of just sets that stage for that constant feedback loop, which we have the point on there of two-way communication. I think setting the stage for that is really important. You want to be delivering feedback to them regularly. You want them to be accustomed to getting that feedback, both good and bad. Make sure that there's a balance of both. Like, even an employee who's struggling needs to hear the areas that they're doing well on. Sure. Even if a category, let's say, is still below expectations, if they're making improvement on it, they need to hear that, like, this is improving. It still has a ways to go. Sure. So having those weekly one-on-ones, I think, is really important there. And then I say two-way communication for a reason. Like, we always end every meeting with employees, and you do this in every meeting I'm in with you, of, hey, like, while we're sitting here, what do you need from me? What can I be doing more of for you? Is there anything that you're not getting right now? We even ask for feedback on the meetings there of like, hey, is weekly enough? Do we need to be sitting down more? Do we need more time? Is this too often? Really, again, setting the stage where they can give you that same feedback, both to help them succeed. Like they need to feel like they can come to you with things if they aren't being provided with a tool or a resource or your time that they need to succeed. And then also for, future hires that you have there, if all you do is constantly give the feedback to your employees and you're continuously seeing employees not work out and they haven't given you any feedback, then you're really not able to learn from that process so that you can be better with future ones. So I think that's really key as well. And then the last piece on there is actually the middle point I kind of hopped around was goal setting.
That's unacceptable here. We're very rigged. We have to stick to a schedule. Very, very, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Goal setting, something we're big fan of. So that's, I know both of us, we feel has had a huge impact on our careers from super, super early on. Senior management sitting down with us, usually end of the year, beginning of the year, right at that, January-ish time span, sitting down and talking about annual goals that we have. There's a bunch of different formats we can use for those. There's the Zig Ziglar wheel. I'm more of I just set like a short-term and a long-term goal in both personal and professional. But instilling that in your employees, I think is huge. One, so many people have never had written goals, especially in the workplace, and very rarely have felt a boss that's willing to support them in those goals, especially when you start getting into some of the personal ones, which I would encourage you to encourage your employees to share. Because, we always kind of say the same thing of like, at the end of the day, if, one of your employees won the lottery, they're probably not coming back tomorrow, right?
That's fair.
They are there for the money to support the things in their personal life. So the more you can be bought in and helping them see what they're going to achieve, I work harder at work, that will help me achieve these things, then I will do this with that in my personal life, the more of a motivator that is. And hopefully, every agent on here can relate to that of like, that's probably what motivates you. It's probably what has made you want to fuel and grow your business is the things you can achieve with it in your personal life. So as much as you can pass along those same traits and those same things to your employees, I think you would agree that's one of the, if I kind of look at another indicator of success in an employee, ones that come to us with really well-formed, good goal meetings. Sometimes those are 2 hours long. We only do them once a year.
I love those.
Those are almost always rock star employees that are taking them serious. And on the flip side, people who show up and are not prepared for those can also be a telling sign on the other way of like, if your senior leadership's taking the time to sit down with you once a year and do your goals, and we're given things to prep for and don't show up with those, I think that's also,
it's very telling.
Can be a telling sign.
Very, very telling.
And then even just shorter term goals as well. We're big on benchmarks, metrics, KPIs, whatever word you want to use for it, giving those to your employees early and often, and then showing them how they measure up to, past performers, the average. If you've got a big enough staff that you can actually give some average numbers to people, whether it's, calls answered or, maybe you have like a customer service score or Google reviews or whatever metrics you guys use. If you can give some metrics to someone early and often, again, I think that's another good telling sign. Do they buy into those and go, cool, how can I improve these? Or do they kind of ignore those? I think those are, other telling things.
So we've hit on this a little bit, talking about like, we talked about how to motivate, how to find the people, how to get the right people, what we always say on the bus, get the right people on the bus. But, like, it's not always rainbows and sunshines. And even, like, your shining star, even if you have just the best person working for you ever, you mentioned it earlier, everybody's gotten some critical feedback or everybody's gotten some, like, hey, this isn't going well. Let's talk about those moments.
Yeah, so this is a lot of things kind of all word vomited onto one slide here. But course correcting, I think, was the term we came up with to try to call this. But in general, could head that direction. But, like, it's another, to use quotes we've been using a bunch, change the people or change the people.
Change the people
is another way to use, like, either someone has to be willing to change or you need to change that person out. So the first point we had on there, I think, is crucial when it comes to delivering feedback, especially if it's a constructive feedback where you're like, hey, I have concerns this employee might not work out, is really finding the reason behind things, not just the symptom. What I mean by that is, it's easy to only see how a problem manifests itself with an employee. Maybe it's taking too long of breaks. Maybe it's, playing around on the computer and not being on task. Maybe it's just not making a high enough call volume. I can go through a bunch of different reasons there. That's the symptom. Typically, that's caused by something else, though. Similar to, doctor-patient illness type of thing. A cough is caused by some underlying illness. So you got to treat the underlying illness. That's what I would say when it comes to employees. So that's, I think, where it's important to have those, weekly meetings, a good feedback loop there, so that when you are delivering that feedback to someone, you can kind of dig a little deeper. If someone is, messing around and not paying attention, like, what's going on? Like, are you not feeling like you know what you need to be working on right now? No, I've got a clear understanding of that. Okay, so are you intentionally choosing to push off that work then? Like, well, why is that the case? Again, trying to kind of dig a little bit deeper than just, hey, you're screwing around, stop screwing around, work harder. That's one way to do things, and you can, but a lot of times we have found that there's a deeper cause to that. And sometimes, people got stuff in their personal life. If someone's doing that, like maybe they've got a, sick parent or something that's on their mind or whatever, which is not a reason to not be able to work, but like it will help you understand what's going on.
For sure.
Document is the next point on there.
Yeah, buddy.
This is another one I feel like we've both learned throughout the years the hard way. We're very big believers in written documentation early and often when it comes to any sort of feedback that you have with an employee. And again, constructive feedback.
Yeah, and this is more so to protect you. Depending on the state that you're in and things like that, the burden of proof that somebody no longer needs to be working there can vary. And then also, again, like working with unemployment, things like that, you have to prove that without a doubt you did whatever you could to make that situation work. Now, that's not meaning that you sacrifice productivity. You're not sacrificing your business. That's not what that means. But it does mean that, like, yes, you can prove that you had these conversations. You can prove that this shouldn't be a shock to your client. This is more, again, it seems like a hassle, but it's to protect your butt.
Yeah, and it also just helps with clarity, I feel like, with employees because, depending on your personality, sometimes it's tough to deliver, the super direct feedback consistently throughout the whole time you're sitting down with someone. That's another thing I would say is try to keep those meetings short, to the point, minimal chit chat beforehand, to the point, get out of there. Another thing I would say is the setting for those, private area, pulling someone into your office. If it's a meeting room, whatever, if it's a documentation or a, performance improvement, I would also suggest that you do that in a separate meeting. So if you're having your weekly one-on-ones, if you feel like it's time to document something, make it separate from that meeting. Don't just slide it into there. It helps kind of,
set the tone.
Yeah, set the tone, show the seriousness of like, hey, we're setting aside separate time to do this. And then on that documentation side, at bare minimum, I would do the, kind of basic takeaways from it of here's what we discussed. Here's what the next steps are. Like, here's what I expect from you. And here's when we're going to talk again about this, and send an email to the employee afterwards at bare minimum. In many cases, I would suggest having them sign something in writing. So, same thing, here's the concerns we discussed. Here's the plan to improve it. And then here's either how long we're going to give you to improve it, or if it's not necessarily on a timeline with that, we're going to meet weekly, bi-weekly, whatever, to discuss improvement. So documenting well. Accountability is the next step of that. So you can have a meeting with someone, bring feedback to their attention, document it. But if there's not the follow through to actually hold them accountable to that and hold yourself accountable to whatever tools and resources you're telling them that, you're going to give them or that they need to improve, all of it falls flat. So accountability, I think, is super crucial to that of you have to be willing to follow through and you have to be willing to hold that person accountable. If to simplify, if it's a 1 to 10 scale, you need to see them doing like an 8, 9, or 10. If, they were at a 2 and now they've improved to a 4 and you're like, well, they've improved, and you kind of like let off a little bit, I promise all you're doing is hurting them and yourself in the long run by not continuing to tell them, hey, we've made some progress, but we still have ways to go. It's really easy early on to go, well, they've improved some, so like they've tried. I would feel strongly that all that's going to do is create animosity in the long run. You'll settle for it in the short term, but then 2, 3, 4 months later, you're going to be like, oh my God, this is still way less than we expected.
Yeah.
You'll find yourself growing angry about it and then really wanting to bring down the hammer on an employee. And if you have not continued giving them the feedback that it still needs to improve in the meantime, you're going to be kind of caught in a catch-22 where you're like, either you're just going to be a bad person and all of a sudden bring the house down on them and tell them, it's time to, fix it or get out of there. And they're like, whoa, where did this come from? Like, you talked to me 3 months ago and you said things were improving and then I haven't heard from you. Or you're going to be where you're going to have to basically start that whole process over and go, okay, we're going to start this. And like, you're still not as good as we want. We need to improve. So anyway, all that to say, lots of accountability, lots of constant feedback afterwards, very direct, like you said, kindness and honesty. 30-day performance improvement plan. So that's just, to kind of put a title on one way to go about this. That's a term that we get now through Integrity as a performance improvement plan, where if someone is struggling, their performance is not meeting expectations, you sit down, document the way we just talked about, and then just put a timeline on it. It could be a week, it could be 30 days, it could be 90 days, it could be whatever. I'd say probably 30 days, though, would be the higher end of what you'd want to give before you have some further action. But just, again, making it time-bound, especially if your brain is thinking this might be headed towards a termination. Written documentation that's signed with a timeline on it, I feel is pretty important there. And then, that kind of goes hand in hand with the next point there of just documenting before termination, barring something, really outlandish. Someone steals, lies, cheats, totally crosses a line. Those are situations where, termination on the spot makes sense and is probably going to be legally defensible. But if it's strictly performance-based or personality-based or just not a right fit, you got to have some sort of written documentation prior to termination to show that it was brought to their attention, they had a chance, all that. Like you said, help protect yourself for sure against any sort of, legal action to try to help that. But also, to your point there, if you're planning to contest unemployment, I'll just tell you, it's really hard, at least in Missouri, to contest unemployment and not have that come back on you, even with a lot of documentation. But if you're hoping to not be paying unemployment, definitely make sure you got tons and tons and tons of documentation.
And then the last one is an exit interview. It's something that you think when it leaves on their terms. Because even even on the best circumstances, you might be the best employee ever. People may not want to be an admin and an insurance carrier for forever, right? Or not carrier, but an insurance company for forever. So it's likely that, especially if you're really great people, that they're not going to be with you. So understanding, what can you learn from the experience? Yes, you invested in them. Yes, you gave them all the knowledge that they need to be the best employee and the best person ever in the entire world. But what can you learn from their experience working with you? And I think being vulnerable enough to accept that feedback.
Totally. And it's something we've only recently started doing, maybe in the last year or so, really pushing hard on the exit interviews for things there.
Not a lot of people voluntarily leave us.
Sure. It's mostly been interns who, just age out have been the primary ones that we have there.
Leonardo DiCaprio, the age out. Sorry.
But we have had a few others. But I think that's a really helpful process. And literally I set the stage with hey, give us everything 100% honest. Worst we can do is fire you, right? Hey, you're already leaving, no reason to not be honest with us. And we explained to them, why we're doing this. Hey, I hope you feel like we spent a lot of time trying to help you, invest in you, make you more successful. The feedback you give us, as honest and transparent as it could be, even if some of it's painful, just helps us improve for the next person that comes along. So please be honest with us.
Yeah.
And we ask a lot about things like the support system. Did they feel like they had all the tools, all the training, all the resources to do their job
Fixable
well?
Things. It's did you hate me as a person? That's not a helpful question.
Yeah.
But what was your experience with our tools, our resources, and how can we improve those going better?
Totally. If they were leaving for another job, we ask, what were the contributing factors? Was it pay? Was it culture? Was it hours? Was it flexibility? Was it just the job itself isn't what you wanted to do? Yeah. And sometimes, if you're hopefully that person well enough, you've usually kind of already know the answers to some of those things. But I think that's helpful. We ask about, would they refer, a friend or a family member to work here?
That's a good question.
I think that's a good one
You
there.
have some interesting answers on that though, because they're like, no, because I don't mix friends and business.
Yeah, I mean,
like you get some weird ones. Like
every now and then you get some weird stuff. But anyway, we've got scripts for this stuff. If anyone's got specific questions on this, we can share.
And I think that's something like even with our current people, every probably 6 months we'll put out a survey, but it's a very specific survey. Like we won't just say how's your experience here, because that's way too broad.
1 through 5.
I know, right? That's way too broad. So when we do these surveys with our employees, what we do, because again, you and I have for the past since 2019 actually ran the sales team together. And so when we would run the meetings together, and so we would ask a question like, on a scale from 1 through 5, how applicable are the trainings we're giving you? How do you find your
we did those randomly. Yeah, exactly. We did those, or anonymous is what I should say. We did those as anonymous surveys. Yeah.
And it was, what do you find value in it? We these meetings are an hour long. Do you think they're too long or too short? What, give us some examples of topics
rate each section of the meeting, so we have them structured. Yep.
So so when you're asking for that feedback, it's best to be incredibly direct and very focused on that, and then also remind your people take into consideration recency bias. If things are going really bad right now, maybe not the appropriate time to do those surveys, because obviously what you're going through now, you may answer it differently later.
And I would say with all of those interview questions, exit interview questions, surveys, all that stuff, just really look at your questions hard to make sure you're not steering towards the answer you want. I would have a third party who's as unbiased as you can get read that and kind of give you honest feedback. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a longer term trusted coworker, business partner, whoever. But if you write it, someone else should read it to make sure that you've stared out of the bunch, you put a lot of thought into it. It's very easy sometimes for your questions to steer towards a particular answer, which doesn't do you any good. Like if your questions do that, you may get great feedback and you're like, oh my God, I'm doing everything perfect. You're like, well, if your questions very clearly steered it there, all you did was waste your and your employees' time.
So if you ask anybody on the agent resources team and anybody else who I've personally hired, their favorite interview question that I ask is always the same. Do you know? Because you've been in a lot of my interviews. Do you know which one it is?
I don't know. You've asked a couple weird ones. The spirit animal.
The spirit animal I haven't done in a really long time because it made me look really weird. The one I used to do, and my favorite answer was a red panda. That's another story. But the question that I still ask people when I do my interviews is, explain to me how tic-tac-toe
That tic-tac-toe question.
Yeah, explain to me, if I pretend that I'm an alien, I've never been here before, teach me how to play tic-tac-toe. And anyways, it's just interesting. It makes us laugh, kind of breaks a little bit of the ice, but it also helps me understand, because with agent resources, I have to know that you can articulate and explain something well and communicate. So there's some fun ones here, but we have a whole list of our interview questions that we ask. We have all of these forms. If you guys are interested in that, let us know. Do you have a couple questions that came in?
Cool.
But I know you think you had a
I had one more thought on that. Just you were kind of talking about how the tic-tac-toe exercise helps you with agent resources. Mm-hmm. That I think brings to a good point of the interview questions need to be identifying the traits that job needs. There's not a silver bullet interview script that hires the perfect people every time. It's got to be applicable to the job. Someone who's doing data entry is going to be a very different job interview because you're looking for very different things than someone who's going to be a field agent. So just looking for those, for example, we spend probably 15 minutes introducing, it's me and the other hiring manager, discussing our personal lives. And we start the interview with that and then ask them to do it. I'm looking to see if they build on any of those things. Oh, I also like cars. Oh, I'm also a Chiefs fan, whatever. Looking for those personal connections because we're hiring salespeople. Yeah. Salespeople need to be able to make those personal connections quickly. So, just as a for instance there, make sure your interview tailors to what you actually want to hire.
So one of the questions we got, and maybe you'll understand this, can we discuss possibility of bonding employee?
Oh, like staff bonding? You're meaning camaraderie? I think that's what they're meaning.
I'm assuming that you mean building that camaraderie, building culture. So give us your feedback on that.
Man, that's one of those things of, I think a really good quote that I heard years ago at a conference was, culture is what your employees say about you when you're not in the room. That's a good quote to culture of culture is not beanbag chairs and ping pong tables and, pizza parking lot parties with beer and pizza, right? culture is how your employees feel about their coworkers, about you as a boss, about coming to work. So I think it's sometimes so oversimplified to like, oh, like you just do some fun things and give people fun perks. Like we've both seen firsthand tons of places that give all those perks and have miserable employees that absolutely hate working there because it's very thinly veiled that like we give you all this stuff so that we can treat you like not nice.
This is you can say.
I don't know.
Here.
I don't know what
it's Medicare Cafe.
I don't know if this is FCC regulated. I don't know the
and
rules
the FCC
here.
won't let me.
Is it like a PG-13 movie? Do I get one F-bomb?
You get one F-bomb.
No. Okay. No, I'm not gonna do that. Okay. Anyway, I lost my train of thought there because I'm a squirrel with a shiny object. But anyway, the culture is much more about walking the walk, talking the talk. Like the bonding things are great to be able to add, but at the end of the day, it's do they relate to the people they're working for and working with, and does everybody actually want to be here?
So Michelle might be clarifying, but she says insurance bond since employees are dealing with confidential information. Good discussion, though. So oftentimes, again, when we talk about, I'll say like in the eyes of like insurance, right? You're having your employees dealing with HIPAA, which is private information, so it has to be secure information. It used to be that the rule said that it was actually a CMS rule that if you are working with, say it, I dare you, senior marketing, mom and dad. Okay, anyways, they say that if you are dealing with client information, then you do have to go and it's actually like what the carriers require as well, that you're supposed to be performing quarterly or semi-annual background checks on your client, on your employees. That is if they are not taking the AHIP. If you have agents, licensed agents as staff, which like sometimes I recommend, more times I don't. That's a whole nother conversation. But if you have people who are licensed insurance agents and the carriers are actually running background checks on them regularly for you, so you don't actually have to do that. And people have to do annual testing and to basically show that they understand HIPAA, they understand Privacy Act, they understand all of that. So if your clients are, if your staff is taking the AHIP, they technically don't have to do those trainings because it's covered in the AHIP and the carriers are performing the background checks. However, if you have staff that are not licensed, do not have contracts with carriers, you are supposed to be doing regular background checks, ongoing background checks with those employees, and they're supposed to be doing the fraud, waste, and abuse training annually. That is, again, covered in the AHIP. So, again, it's typically free for them to do. Oftentimes, I think it may not be free for you to require that, but it's really, really affordable. I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I don't remember the cost. But that is technically something that you should be doing in order for them to be covered by your E&O and everything.
And as far as actually getting a business bond there, I don't feel like that's something that I'm qualified to give you advice on there. I would say talking to either a lawyer or a bondsman, whoever that would be. Bondsman, is that the right word? I think bondsman's like the wrong kind of bond.
The
My
jail
bad.
bond.
Yeah. Wrong word there. But I don't have any legal advice on that one.
No legal advice. Plus, look, we're not lawyers. We're not good at that. I do want to answer another question, but I'll answer that at the end of that, talking about Retire Flow versus Medicare Center, because believe me, I have opinions. But Terry, longtime listener, comments. I love Terry. We love Terry. You don't know Terry. You don't watch the cafe, so you don't know Terry. I love Terry. Terry says, is a personal assistant considered an employee?
Yes. I mean, like, are you paying them? So I would say yes. But
be careful because there's a joke in here about like a spouse and like how are you paying? And not important.
Right. Maybe and potentially you're meaning like a virtual personal assistant. Maybe is more what you're thinking there. So I mean, like that'd be kind of blurring the lines. Like if it's a shared service type thing where you're just paying for someone remote to work for you there, like. It's kind of a little both. Like, there's certain things where you wouldn't probably be able to treat them the same as a regular employee, but also at the end of the day, like they're going to be representing your brand to your client. So
different liabilities,
yeah,
right? Like the liability of like a lot of what we're talking, like the legal liability. Oftentimes, it depends on who's writing. Okay, focus. Okay, whose name is on their paycheck. That's who holds the liability as far as like the legality, right? Obviously you have to have agreements and contracts. If you're not the person paying them, you're hiring a service and the service is paying them, that's one thing. But what Carson's getting into, which is wildly important, is understanding that if somebody represents your brand, then they can make or break you.
Yeah.
Sometimes hiring the cheapest, I was working with an agency long ago, and he was talking about how he hired this new assistant, and he was so excited because she didn't cost him nearly as much as the other assistant. She was a receptionist. She was wonderful. She actually worked at a gas station, so she was happy just to get out of the gas station, happy to get out there. And then because like he didn't talk about her skills, didn't talk about anything like that, ended up being a horrible situation for him because she didn't know how to answer the phone, didn't know how to work a computer.
That always makes me think of like, classic, like, you what you pay for, but I've always heard the parachute analogy. Like, do you want the cheapest parachute or do you want the best parachute?
I always heard that as like vasectomy. Do you want the best one or do you want the cheap one?
Alrighty then.
Like Carrie. So Carrie does have a personal assistant. Carrie does have somebody. There's a joke half. Anyway, Carrie does have a personal assistant that she works through, but she actually hires. So Carrie pays for that person. So all the liability.
It is an actual employee.
It is an employee of hers. And so there's obviously, again, she does have to go with the legalities and the rules associated with that. But yes, Carrie does personally pay her personal assistant.
Yep.
Okay. So it looks like that's all the questions we have about what is
hiring,
firing, managing stuff. Ugh. But I do want to answer this question, talking about, again, kind of looking at Medicare cafes from the past. We're going to get through this together, guys, I promise. It's 10:43. No wonder I'm not wording well. We're 15 minutes over.
I was in my 30 minutes. I just want to be clear.
You took that personally.
It was the great audience questions.
I love it. If you guys don't talk to me, then like I don't have a job, so thank you. Can we discuss Retire Flow versus Medicare Center as it relates to information of gathering prescriptions, doctors, pharmacies, and things like that? Okay. My true 2 cents. I would never lie to you guys. So why is this a question? Number one, we know, again, going into this AEP, systems, processes, and technology is the only way we're getting out of this AEP alive. If you're like, what are you talking about? It's just AEP. Go watch the last few Medicare cafes that I've done. It's going to be nuts.
On Friday.
Or show up on Friday. That is a good. We're doing this again.
We're doing a webinar on Friday about that.
That one is a senior marketing specialist webinar, so I'll be very, very professional. But we're doing a webinar talking about what 2025 AEP is going to look like and the disruption that follows. And I truly believe only the prepared and only the people who have their systems, process, and technology ready to go will, and I'm not being dramatic, will survive it. It's going to be insane. 5 times the shopping rates than what we've seen since 2012, before you and I, yes. Right? This will be our 12th AEP. So all that being said, Retire Flow, what Retire Flow is, it is a link that you get, that you send to your clients. It's a program, it's a monthly service that you purchase, and you get a personalized URL link that you send to beneficiaries, clients, doesn't matter, prospects, and it has them collect medication, providers, health conditions, specialists that they see, collects the scope of appointment, and collects permission to contact, and it's incredibly user-friendly. That's the one thing that I'm just like, I can't get over. It's just so user-friendly. And honestly, when it comes to technology, if it's not user-friendly, the user's not going to use it, which makes it virtually useless, right? So I really do enjoy our partnership we have with Retire Flow. You do get a discount if you work with us. It is second to none, a great method to really make the most out of your AEP. Now, Medicare Center, what does that look like? So Medicare Center is obviously the home-built, homegrown platform that Integrity has built for agents to utilize completely free. It's a CRM meets call recording, meets marketing platform, meets personal website, meets CRM, again, meets enrollment platform. So it actually encompasses so many things, like a one-stop shop for their agents. Currently, right now, the Medicare Center platform does not have a way to send a client their information for them to upload their own med information. So right now, the only way that drug information, provider information, all that is if an agent manually updates it themselves. That is going to change. Going into AEP, we're being told that, like, I know I'm very excited. Yeah. I'm very excited. I can't go into too much detail, But I will tell you, the agent website that you're being equipped with, the provider gathering information, it's going to be a really, really, really slick tool. And of course will be free for agents to utilize. So if you're in the Medicare Center platform,
will feed into
we'll
all of your
feed
Medicare Center data.
We'll feed into everything.
Not two separate places
exactly,
you're going.
Not two separate platforms. So if you're utilizing Medicare Center for quoting enrollment, things like that, the platform will have that capability. If you're not using Medicare Center, then you need to know what Medicare Center will do for you. That's not saying anything negative against Retire Flow. It's just a different method of that. So both are viable options. That just comes down to you have to have an option.
Yes.
You have to have something. So hopefully that clears it up.
Come watch us Friday at
Watch us
I don't
Friday.
remember what time.
I think it's
during the day on Friday.
I think it's 11. Go to smsteam.net, click on the events tab, register. Right now we only have about 100 spots to be able to watch that, and we have well over 100 people register for that event. So get on there, make sure you log on early, because once we hit our limit, you will be kicked off. You will not be able to watch that. We'll likely be doing the webinar multiple times, but as we get more information, we will be recording it. But I hate watching recorded webinars, even though they're me and I do everything amazingly. I just don't get the same out of it. So make sure you join. We will be taking questions live. We will be answering anything that you have, but AEP prep this year doesn't start in June, doesn't start in August. AEP's prep started a couple weeks ago, and we'll talk about why on Friday.
Cool.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, threats, or promises, please put them in there. If not, again, if you're watching the recorded version of this is my texting line. Text me at any time. Happy to answer your questions. And looking forward to seeing everybody on Friday, for sure.
Awesome.
Okay,
I don't see any questions.
Do you know how this ends on the one episode that you watched? Do you know the call signed?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you should feel so humiliated. Okay, so what happens is I say, have fun. You say, make money.
Make money.
And at the same time, we say, and give impeccable service.
Oh, yeah.
You can do this.
Don't
act like you know.
Shut up.
Don't act like you know.
I know that's your thing. I didn't know there was like a secret handshake
it's
to
not.
do with that.
It's just simply just being a fan of the cafe.
All right, I'm watching.
So until next time, guys, have fun.
Make money.
And give impeccable service.
My bad. I messed up still.